Before you jump right in and start building your game, it is a great idea to prototype your idea first. What this means is using free assets from the App Store or even some of the built-in included assets and creating a very quick project that demonstrates what you're trying to do. It doesn't have to look anything like the finished product, it just has to have similar mechanics. And it's really to be proof of concept to show that your idea will work. The reason why this is good is because you can identify very early on whether the game is actually going to be fun or not. Some ideas look great in your head, but when you actually go ahead and implement them, they don't turn out so well. So the prototyping process is for you to give feedback to yourself of whether this is a good idea. And if you're in a team, let other people play it and say, okay, this idea has potential, or nah, scrap it. So let's have a look at how you might build an extremely quick prototype in Unity. So I've selected New. Let's call it 2D game prototype. And what I want to prototype here is a platformer game, so I'm just going to call it platformer. It's going to be a 2D game, so I'm setting it to the 2D option. Now let's have a look at asset packages. You don't have to add an asset package at this stage, you can add it later on, but because we already know that we want to use some built-in assets, we can go ahead and select 2D. Okay, when you're ready, hit Create Project. Notice that since we selected that we want to bring in those packages at the start, it's gone ahead and loaded those packages for us. Okay, so you can see down here in your project viewer, there are these two folders, one called Editor, one called Standard Assets. If you have a look under Standard Assets, 2D, you'll see some pretty familiar folders if you've worked with Unity before. There's an Animations, Animator, Materials, Physics Material, Prefabs, Scripts, and Sprites folder. Let's take a look under Prefabs. Okay, so we can see here prefabs for a character, a collision slider, a bunch of platform objects, and a kill zone. So let's drag a few of these on the scene to see what we're able to quickly put together without writing any code or really putting too much effort into it. So if I grab one of our platforms, I can drag that on, and I want this platform to be a little bigger. So in the X scale, I can change that to say 5. And now the platform has been scaled up. If I want to move this around, I can have a look at the position, change its X position and Y position by either grabbing and sliding or typing in a new number. Okay, now I'm just going to grab a different platform and put that onto here as well. And also I'm going to grab the character and drag that onto the scene and just put it just above one of the platforms. Now I'm going to explain what I've just done very soon, but first let's just go and hit play with these 3 objects on the scene area. Okay, the scene is now running. If I use the directional arrows, I can now move the character. If I use the spacebar, I can make the character jump. If I use the control key, the character will duck. Yeah, notice how the character will run along these platforms. If it runs into a platform, it won't be able to pass it. However, you can jump on top of that platform. So all we did to be able to prototype this game is drag 3 objects onto the scene. That's every single thing that we did. So that just shows how quickly and easily you can create a prototype of a game. Now you might not have all the assets you need for the particular type of game that you want, but if you have a look on the asset store, you may find something suitable. Or you may use your prototyping time to build out some code so that you can create a quick object that will represent your character and be able to play out a scene. When you are done playing around with the character, hit the play button again and that will stop the scene from playing. Okay, so what is it we actually did then? If you haven't heard of what a prefab is before, think of it this way. Your character is made up of multiple items, which you can see over here in the inspector. So these are a lot of different components of different types. If I was to decide that I wanted 2 characters on the scene, I would then have to go through the process of building it out from scratch again. So adding an object, then adding each of the components. What a prefab does is it packages all of these parts together so that every single time you drag the prefab onto the scene, all of those components come with it. And then when you hit play, you'll see now I have two objects that work in the same way. Each one reacts to controls, each one has a rigid body and a collider. We'll go over them in a lot more detail over what these components are and what they do when you get to that point in the lesson, but just know for now that each of these components are to do with the physics of the character, so how it collides with objects, what its weight is, things like that. And the scripts are more around the controls of the character and how it interacts with the objects around it. When you have a look at the sprite renderer while the game is playing, you'll notice that it keeps changing through sprites. This is because it's running an animation. So at the moment it's cycling through idle animations. If I was to jump, it's going to start cycling through jump animations. Now, one thing to note very early on is that any changes you make to the game while it is running will only be active while the game is running. So if I was to double the mass of my character, change that to 2, you'll see one character jumps much higher than the other one now because one of them is a lot heavier. If I was to stop the game, its mass has now reverted back to 1. So any changes, for them to be permanent, have to be made outside of the game running. Okay, so that's how you very quickly prototype a 2D game. I recommend having a bit of a play around with that. There's a lot of resources in here. Most of them at this stage in the tutorials you probably won't know how to use them, but it's just giving you an idea of what's available and how it works. In the next video we'll look at doing the same thing again, however in a 3D environment. And while the scope of this course is not specifically around 3D, it's just something that's handy to know.